Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Toby Gunn.
Hello, I might just quickly start off by, I don't deserve that much credit. I didn't actually leak those 2,000 reports. I've spoken to them. I am an author of some of those reports, but I spoke out before that, and I'll take you through the reasons why I ended up speaking out. I've got to be honest, when I got asked to talk at this event on the common good, I struggled. How do I link it to Nauru? Not because it doesn't exist there, it does. You're just not allowed to see it, you're just not allowed to know them. It comes in football-sized giggling bundles, toddlers learning their first words, sassy teenagers with more talk back than the radio. It exists, it is there. But before I start, like the other members today, I'd like to recognise the traditional owners of this land, the Ngunnawal people, and echo what another speaker spoke about, that the land was never ceded. The land which we stand on was stolen, still stolen. My story starts at Ngunnawal Rural Show down on the south coast, age 8, where I was taking part in an activity that we all do but rarely admit to, seeing how many free tasters I could collect. One store stopped me in my bounty hunt tracks with a free badge. This badge. It confused me. Why was there a child and their parent behind wires? The answers the lady gave me only confused me more. The child and the parent had done no wrong. Rather, the child had been at risk from people who wanted to do them harm. This made no sense. And I can tell you down in Bega there was a very motivated group of 8-year-olds who would have told you that this makes no sense. But hey, maybe that's the first lesson. Listen to 8-year-olds. I did not know it then, but my path would take me behind that fence to work with a child just like this one. Fast forward just under a decade and a half and I was full swing into my working with youth. I'd found my passion in first delivering and managing community development programs. It was at this time in late 2013 I applied to work on Nauru. I was ambitious. I thought if there were people who cared, people who were passionate, people who would work hard, people with the right knowledge, the right experience, that we could make a difference. But my naivety was very simple. I had never worked in a place where a human's best interests, let alone a child's, was not put first. On my first rotation to Nauru, I remember sitting down with my department manager, going over the youth and children program in the family camp. I was shocked. There was no proper curriculum, no aims and outcomes in a place that probably needed it the most. However, it was when I first entered the camp that the reality of the place hit home. It was not the security checkpoints, the fences, the guards, the makeshift marquee tents. It was a small child who tripped and fell. As I knelt down to comfort her, I asked her the simplest of questions, her name. And as I brushed off the rocks off her knees, and she wiped the tears from her eyes, she answered, UBA 183. Confused, I repeated my question and she her answer. Then it hit home. It was her boat ID. You see, inside detention, children cannot go and get a meal, go to school, go anywhere into the different sections of the camp without mentioning their boat ID. For many of the young children I worked with, it would become more important than their real names. They would sign their drawings, not with their names, but with their boat IDs. This same young child would come to me months later, sobbing, crying, Toby, what had I done? What have I done? I'm sorry. She had learned the concept of a jail. She thought she had done something wrong. She was bad because she was in a place where there was fences, there was guards. The weight of uncertainty that indefinite detention places on people is something that is hard to comprehend. It places you in a situation of no past, no future, where hopelessness at some point is certain. Your first day is the same as your 10th, same as your 100th, same as your 900th. as you have not moved any closer to a future or away from the past you flee. I started to doubt the difference that workers could make around 4 months into my work on Nauru. My ethics, my values started to come into question as rotation after rotation, the families I worked with broke down. The spiral down was unstoppable. I was seeing what a policy of deterrence meant, how it worked practically. Almost exactly a year ago, I was given a speech after the release of the Nauru files. That night, I felt hope. Not hope in that some way there would be a happy ending. I already knew it was too late for that. You cannot simply undo the abuse, psychological trauma that had been inflicted on or witnessed by the children I worked with. But hope that we would finally, as a community, as a nation, take responsibility, do the right thing, and in that responsibility, rediscover something that along the way we had lost. Lost in the political slogans, the news articles, the facts and figures on what has occurred to them, those we must not see, those we must not know. If found, it would be something that could undo all of this. It is the simplest of truths, maybe the illegal truth. That truth is that behind the fences, behind the guards, on a remote island lies a body that has been hit, a body that has been touched, even raped, a body that bears the scars of an attempt to escape its torment. That body is you. You are a mother, a father, a brother, a sister. You are a grandparent. You are a friend. You are a teacher, a farmer, a mechanic, a cleaner, a business owner. But this does not define you. You have aspirations, you have dreams, you have a first love, you have a favourite song. You laugh, you cry, you bleed, you dream, because you are human. They are human. Today, hopefully, in the smallest of ways, we can rediscover this simple truth, as without it we cannot hope to find a solution. However, I warn this process won't be easy. With the release of the Nauru files containing over 2,000 reports, you, like me, will know that cases of abuse are not isolated. That children, who only make up 10% of those in detention centres, represent over 50% of those reports. This poses the question, if so many abuses are occurring, it tells you something beyond the individual acts by perpetrators and predators. Although we need to hold to account the individuals that have committed these acts. Abuse on this scale does not occur through individuals. It occurs through the institutionalisation of abuse and the institutionalised acceptance of abuse. There are a few things that need to occur to allow institutionalised abuse to occur without the general public standing up and stopping it. One of these things is dehumanisation, depriving a certain group of positive human qualities. This starts with language. You must first transform the issue, transforming a humanitarian issue to that of border security, from a refugee to an illegal, from needing safety and deserving help to a criminal deserving punishment to be feared. Sorry guys, there is the next slide. Whoop.
You go from looking after people to saying, if you come here, we're going to make it worse for you than if you'd stayed where you came from.
The protection we offered was slashed. More people were locked up.
We cannot run our country on the basis that people who come here illegally...
From now on, any asylum seeker who arrives in Australia by boat will have no chance of being settled by Australia.
Boat arrivals,
irregular maritime arrivals,
unauthorised arrivals,
illegal arrivals by
Transferees, a message to the transferees with transferees.
you will not be transferred to Australia.
transferees illegally by boat, have illegally entered by boat. It's illegal boats.
Illegally by boat, illegally enter Australia by boat.
The island detention centres are kept secret from journalists and the Australian public. Nauru is a tiny island, barely 21 square kilometres in the centre.
Governments from both sides have gone to extraordinary lengths to prevent scrutiny of how detainees are treated on the remote tropical outposts of Manus Island and Nauru.
No journalists, no filmmakers, no cameras are allowed in.
Notices yesterday saying that people could get up to 3 years jail for being involved in protests.
Nauru have arrested scores of refugees, possibly up to 100, in the wake of recent protests.
New laws that will apply from tomorrow to some people working in immigration detention centres. under the Border
aspect
Force
of the new
Act.
system is a secrecy provision, which some say could result in whistleblowers, including those working in offshore detention centres, being jailed for 2 years.
The government has defended its controversial crackdown on free speech and the ban of Facebook as necessary measures.
The way the authorities have treated people who have gone public so far.
Police investigate Save the Children whistleblowers over Nauru abuse report.
Now I want you to think, when was the last time you heard anything that would remind you that those on Nauru and Manus are people? I don't mean objects, numbers, figures, or a story of the most recent tragedy inflicted on a faceless body. I mean who they are, what they did before they had to flee, what made them flee, what made them get on a boat, what future do they dream of? It's hard. The truth is, you probably can't. This dehumanisation comes from right here in Canberra. This is how you take the last thing from families that have lost everything, hope. You rename it, criminalise it, hide it and silence it. One thing that hasn't changed through all this is that these people still need help, a certain future. It is still a humanitarian issue. We can lift off these layers of dehumanisation and I can tell you what you will find, as I have met them. You will find faces and stories of courageous and resilient young people who are inspiration in the midst of all the hurt, their passions, their dreams, their talents, their jokes, their support for one another. You will find amazing artists for Newtown in Sydney, a couple of stand-up comedians for Melbourne, a policymaker for Canberra, a young leader, utterly deserving. She never once stopped standing up for those who had been downtrodden, even when the weight of her own issues came too much to bear. You'll even find a group of players that will make our A-League soccer team something worth watching. For me, it was not just the horrific incidents of physical abuse I witnessed that was confronting, or the incidents of self-harm or suicide attempts, or seeing the effects that sexual abuse has on a person. It was also the small things that hit home. A mother not being able to bake a cake for her family, her child, the whole family celebrating the birthday with no presents. Smiles on the surface, but when it's all over, the father breaking down because he's so ashamed he cannot provide, he cannot protect his family. As my time on Nauru continued, a question kept nagging at me. It grew louder as I understood more about the system I was working within. I came to realise the mishandling of vulnerable people's cases was not isolated. My co-workers from across different departments shared identical stories. Children being placed in environments where it was known harm would occur, put there against the advice of professionals. The lack of proper mental health support, the regular downgrading of incident reports by Wilson Security, the fact that not once in my time on Nauru was the topic of human rights or the rights of the child ever discussed in any of the Save the Children department meetings. It was never discussed how these rights could apply in this environment, where these rights were being broken, how we could advocate for change. There was no formal avenue to advocate or processes for workers on the ground to collate evidence to support proposals for change. I had to smuggle a temperature gauge into the centre in my shoe to take readings of the temperatures inside those tents, as the documentation on heat-related illnesses was not enough. And I couldn't do it openly because I was not allowed to take that into the camp. What might I expose? The ethical questions kept on nagging. Is our presence as a humanitarian organisation and my presence as a worker in some way condoning the known harm and abuse inflicted upon the families I worked with? Could I justify my work within a system where harm is the unavoidable outcome? In early 2015, I could no longer justify it. Leaving was the hardest thing I've had to do in my life. I felt a huge and deep sense of guilt that I still carry. I could just leave, while those I worked with could not. It was hard, as they were not all sad memories. There were many laughs. These children and youth showed resilience in the most trying conditions. One memory I will never forget is when a group of young kids came running as we entered the camp. Quick, quick, come quick. One of the older teenage boys had made a kite. Now when we arrived, this kite was ridiculously high up. I could hardly see it. Toby, it's 1 kilometre up. Now, look, I did believe him because I could hardly see it, but I couldn't give him that. Nah, mate, no way. And with a big toothy grin, he replied to me, Toby, let's just say my teeth aren't too clean. What? Well, it was 1.5 years worth of tooth floss tied together. He knew exactly how high that clock was to the metre. Later that day, after he put it down, a very, very delicate process, he came and showed me the kite because he wanted to teach the other children how he made it. Toby, all you need is garbage bags, sticks, sticky tape and tooth floss. Great. There was also a more serious reason why he wanted to teach the other children how to make a kite and so they could fly a kite. He said, Toby, when I fly that kite, I am free. A day later, I turned back and looked out over the detention centre, and I could not help smiling as silhouetted against the sunset was not one, but 2 kites. And I could hear a faint cheer as a third one bobbed up above the fence line. I left Nauru knowing I had witnessed something truly horrific, something that future generations will look back on and ask, how did this occur? I did not plan to become a whistleblower, but they say whistleblowers speak up when their experiences become incompatible with what is being portrayed as truth. This, for me, came when the Moss Review was revealed, and the government, in reply, stated that they had a zero-tolerance approach to abuse. I knew that they had known about cases of abuse at least 17 months prior, and knowingly left victims in an unsafe environment where the abuse had occurred, where the victim had been threatened because they had reported the abuse. This was done against the advice of professionals. So I found myself sitting in the car park trying to stop my hands from shaking before my first interview. I was driven because those I worked with were silenced and hidden, made incapable of changing their own fates. Driven by the fact that the Australian public were being misled. Driven by that one day I will be a father, and when I look my child in the eyes, how could I do that knowing that I had not stood up for their rights, the rights of a child? I was also driven by fear that this would become normalised. If there is one thing I hope you take away from today, it is that the importance of keeping our humanity, as dehumanisation has never and will never solve any issue you come across. History shows this. History shows us that terrible things occur when warning signs are missed. The first step we must take is to recognise that warning signs that are found in history are occurring right now. The base for the solution is rather simple. We must once again recognise and treat these people as just that, people. That means understanding their stories of the past and their hopes for a future. So tonight, please read some of the Nauru files, but don't just read them, rehumanise them. Try and understand them as a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a friend. You will find the cost of our inaction as Australians append into these reports. However, the future is not. We are all here today for an event on the common good, motivated by the urge that we can do better, not just for us, but for others. To engage and challenge ourselves with complex and difficult ideas on the problems that we face. However, right now, it is just that, an event. Words spoken, applause given. The truest challenge starts when you walk out that door. To turn the idea shared and give meaning to the applause, you will need courage. Courage to stand up while the rest sit. Courage to question. Courage to get back up when knocked down. The common good is not a single act for gratitude or thanks. It is a value, a morality, a practice that one takes a lifetime to create, and when successful, there is no celebration, as the act will have become the norm, not the exception. Thank you.